Yep, so welcome then to those that are in the room and those that might be listening to the recording. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Liz Hardy. I'm a member of the Open Justice Centre within the law school, senior lecturer within the law school. And I'm delighted to welcome Lindsey to come and speak to you. So Lindsey, I believe you used to be a law recruiter and you now work as talent development manager for AllAboutLaw. For those of you that are not aware about AllAboutLaw, they provide careers advice, events, links to firms, really to help with those that are looking to enter into the legal profession. So the event today, Lindsey's going to talk to us about her experience and offer some tips about getting a legal job, entering the legal profession, and there will be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So just a reminder, as John Paul said, please do put your questions and answers either in the Q&A button if you can. It makes it easier for us to have it all in one place. But if not, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can email Open Justice, and the email address is currently in the chat. It's open-justice@open.ac.uk, and I'll help facilitate the Q&A at the end. So I think that's everything from me. Over to you, Lindsey.
Great, thank you, Liz, and thank you everyone for having me. It's great to be here with you today. So as Liz said, I'm Lindsey Thompson. I'm going to be talking to you today about careers in commercial law and really the recruitment process for things like vacation schemes and training contracts. So I've been working in early years recruitment for about 20 years now. So my experience has been with large national and international commercial law firms. So I'm mainly going to focus on the recruitment process for those sorts of firms. However, I'd say the advice is still relevant if you're perhaps considering regional firms, high street firms, or perhaps in-house legal departments as well. Now, I imagine many of you may have, sat down to research a law firm or maybe, start an application form and just not known where to begin. So what actually is it that law firms want to hear? How do you actually make yourself stand out? And where do you even start in terms of preparing for that process? Well, I think I'm in a fairly unique position these days in that I had a career in early years, legal early years recruitment for a number of years at HSF Kramer, formerly Herbert Smith when I was there. But for the last 6 years or so, I've been working with AllAboutLaw, and I now work with multiple law firms. So this actually gives me a really good insight into their processes and what they're looking for. But it also means that I'm not here today trying to sell you a particular firm, I guess. So I'm going to spend about 30 minutes or so talking through the process, and during that time the main things that I'd like to cover, firstly, why having a genuine passion for law is really key, how to navigate the challenges of the recruitment process itself, the art of crafting a tailored application, and also a bit of a look at psychometric tests that law firms use. Also then finally just finishing up with how to approach a vacation scheme if you do actually get onto one. I'm also really happy to take questions. As Liz said, please do post your questions. I'll probably come to those at the end, and feel free to ask me anything then. If there are perhaps things that are more specific to yourself, you don't want to ask them today, I'm more than happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn as well and ask me any questions on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to follow up afterwards as well. So when you first start thinking about a career in law, I guess, really the first question you should ask yourself is, why do you want to be a lawyer? And it's also, the question that recruiters and partners, they will want you to be able to answer clearly in an interview or on an application. And I've heard lots of different answers to this sort of question, but quite often things come up like the film Legally Blonde comes up, or the TV show Suits, and I do love both of them, but it's probably best to avoid citing something like that as your main source of motivation. Suits may well have given you a pretty glamorous insight into the world of commercial law, but it's really important to look a little bit deeper. So everyone's motivation for wanting to be a lawyer is going to be different, and that's completely fine, but I think it's really worth taking a bit of time to think about what actually interests you within the law, because it is obviously such a broad field. So, for example, would you enjoy more contentious work where you're dealing with disputes and arguments, maybe even going to court? Or are you more drawn to non-contentious work, so advising clients, negotiating deals, or helping structure transactions? And you can also think about specific areas as well. So, maybe something like intellectual property, where you're working with brands or media or tech, or perhaps employment law dealing with, workplace issues, or maybe perhaps real estate, where you might involve, big projects or infrastructure as well. I mean, there's no right answer here. It's more about noticing really what makes you curious enough to want to learn more. And I think an angle to kind of really think about is industry sectors as well. So lots of firms will organise their work around industry sectors. So things like energy, technology, retail, finance. So ask yourself if any of these, particularly interest you. So for instance, if you're into tech, you might think about questions like, how are new regulations affecting tech companies? What challenges are they facing around data or AI? Or if you're interested in sustainability, what's happening in the energy sector as businesses move towards renewables? Then take it one step further, because this is where it really links to being a lawyer. So how does a lawyer actually help in these situations? And that could be, advising on new regulations, or helping a company manage risk, or maybe structuring a deal, or perhaps supporting them as they expand into a new market. And that's really what being a commercial lawyer is all about. So it's not just knowing the law. You also need to be really interested in how businesses actually work. Lawyers, are essentially business advisors as well. So you really need to understand that bigger picture. And that way of thinking, so, looking at pressures, understanding impact, and then figuring out the legal response, is exactly what people mean when they actually talk about something commercial awareness, which I'm sure you hear all the time. But if you're sitting here thinking, I have no idea which area I really like yet, then don't worry, that's completely normal. You're not expected to have it all figured out at this stage, but there's lots of ways to explore different areas over time. But I think what really matters at this stage is showing that genuine interest and enthusiasm when you're actually learning about different cases or deals or developments. So once you've actually, started doing some research and you're ready to apply to a firm, you'll need to be clear about what the recruitment process actually looks like. So if you're applying for a vacation scheme or a training contract, usually you'll come across a few key stages. So usually you'll have an online application form to start. Some firms do still use a CV and covering letter, but a lot of firms like to tailor, obviously, the questions that they ask in an application. So a lot of them do use their own application. You may then get some psychometric tests, possibly a video interview, and then usually the final stage for most firms is an assessment centre. And that assessment centre might include numerous different exercises. So you might get a group exercise, you might have a case study, perhaps a written task. Usually you'll always have some sort of interview, so maybe a competency or strengths-based interview as well. But not every firm uses all of them. You might, maybe have 2 or 3 of those, or maybe some firms will use, all of those stages. So make sure you check for any firms that you're interested in what their actual process is. Now, these stages are all there for a reason, though. So, firms are trying to get a really, well-rounded view of you, of your skills, your thinking, and your motivation, not just sort of academics. But I know, some of that can feel a bit uncomfortable. Psychometric tests definitely aren't everyone's favourite thing to do, and I think something like a video interview can feel a bit strange at first as well, when you're sort of, not actually talking to someone. But I'd say the key thing really is preparation. So the more you can practice, the more confident you'll feel at each of those stages. And there's some really useful tools to help you with this on All About Law. So we've got lots of video masterclasses which cover each stage of the process. Plus we also have a practice Watson Glaser style test as well, which is great for preparation if you are going to be doing psychometric tests as part of the process. So if there's one thing you do take away from today, it would be, make sure you scan the QR codes, which we've put on this slide here. That will take you through to each of those pages, so you can access those resources. So what is it that recruiters and law firms are actually looking for? That's the big question, I guess. A lot of people have this, idea in their head of maybe what a perfect lawyer looks like, where they've come, what their background is. But firms really honestly aren't looking for a specific type. A firm's clients are extremely varied and diverse, and they really want their trainees to reflect that. So when you're applying, you'll often be asked about your skills and qualities that you could actually bring to the role. And I'd say the key thing here is to really tailor your answer to that firm that you're applying to. So look at what they value. So, on their recruitment pages, do they mention things like commercial awareness, being client focused, being proactive? Then think about how you've actually shown these skills. I mean, don't just list everything you've ever done. I get that quite often, that people just give me a big long list of what they've done, but without any detail. I'd say it's much better to pick 2 or 3 strong examples and really explain them properly. So, for example, if you've done, something like mooting or debating, then you're really building skills like research, structuring arguments, public speaking, all of which come up regularly in practice. So whether that's working through a dispute or helping on a transaction where you'd need to assess options and explain things clearly. Or perhaps you've had experience writing for a student magazine or blog, and that shows attention to detail and clear communication, which are all key for things like drafting contracts. Or maybe you volunteered in perhaps a legal advice clinic. So you're developing a lot of different skills in a role like that, such as listening, problem solving, communicating with clients, which are all directly relevant to being a lawyer. But really, the key is to link your skills to what a trainee actually does day to day. So things like researching legal issues, drafting documents, attending client meetings. So it's really clear how you would actually use the skills that you've built up in the role. So really the important thing here is to kind of join those dots and spell out why that skill is so important. But finally, always remember, we're not just assessing these skills, and we actually want to get a sense of who you are as well. So actually, a lot of applications will ask something about your interests or your hobbies, something you're passionate about. And that's really your chance to show them some personality as well. So law firms aren't looking for, for robots. They really want to see people that are interesting, that are engaged, that, have different experiences. So do show us who you are as well if you do have a question like that. So when it comes to work experience, I'd say don't overly fixate on having legal experience, and particularly if you're applying for a vacation scheme. So a part-time job that you've had perhaps in retail or hospitality, for example, can be just as valuable. You're building skills like teamwork, communication, organisation, resilience every day in a role like that. But the key really is how you present it. So try and include, if you can, a specific achievement to really show your impact. So, for example, maybe you've improved customer feedback, or you've managed a staff or a team, or maybe handled a difficult situation. Recruiters really want to see what you've actually contributed yourself. Then if you can make that link, as I was just talking about, to the trainee role, so things like managing tasks, working to deadlines, communicating clearly with clients, making that link really shows that you actually understand, what would be required in the job. And for career changes as well, I always like to mention that you can bring, a really valuable skills which you will have built up. So, experience in areas like finance or healthcare or teaching, for example, they can give you, a really clearer sense of how organisations actually operate, along with those, transferable skills. So whether that's working with clients, handling responsibility, dealing with different stakeholders. And I think it can also really mean that you understand clients' businesses in a much more practical way if you are a career changer. So, it's a real advantage in a commercial setting. That hands-on experience that you will have had will be such a big asset. So it's definitely worth it. It's definitely something to highlight if you are a career changer. And if you would like to, start gaining some legal experience to strengthen your application, there are actually some good ways to do that these days that weren't around sort of 10, 15 years ago when I was at Herbert Smith. But things like virtual work experiences are a really great way to really great place to start. So they're short, self-paced programs where you actually work through real legal tasks. You'll find these specific firms actually offer them. So Clifford Chance, White and Case, Slaughter and May offer their sort of own virtual experiences. But then platforms like Forage and Legal Cheek as well also offer these sorts of internships. So do have a look at them, because they really help to build your own knowledge and your own confidence with different legal tasks. And they're a great thing to add to an application as well. You could also think about volunteering, so organisations like Citizens Advice or different law clinics like that. Gaining experience in client interaction, in research, in drafting, all great ways to develop your skills and really build that confidence. So I'd say don't feel you have to sort of tick certain boxes in terms of work experience. Really focus on what you've learned in the things that you've done, what impact you've actually made, and how that actually links to being a trainee. I also just wanted to mention another way to gain legal experience can be through paralegal work as well. It's not, I haven't recruited paralegals myself in the past, but obviously within the firms that I've worked with and worked for, paralegals are a really integral part of a law team. So typically paralegal will work on things like legal research, drafting documents, managing tasks, and really supporting the solicitors and the team that they work with. You might also get some client contact as well. And they do play a really important role in firms. Many graduates use it as a bit of a stepping stone to a training contract, although you would still need to go through the same kind of application process as everyone else if you were then moving on to a training contract. But it is really valuable experience. It really helps build your commercial awareness. It gives you a great insight into how law firms actually operate, and really develops those key skills like communication and teamwork. So if that is something you're interested in, most firms will advertise their paralegal vacancies on their own websites. So do check that out if that's something that might be an option for you. So I just want to move now to talk about what really stands out in an application. So I would estimate I've reviewed, I usually say 50,000, but we've just had the last season. I've probably done about 10,000 in the last since about November. So I would say now I've probably reviewed about 60,000 applications. So for a range of different law firms. So I have got a pretty good idea now of what makes a good one, a not so good one, and the kind of average one, which is somewhere in the middle. And unfortunately, the average and the not so good just won't get you through that first stage of the process. So most firms will focus on a few different things in their application. Generally, there'll be why this law firm, why commercial law, and why you type section. So it's usually those three things that most firms want to know. My first piece of advice is please be specific. Really tailor your answers to that firm that you're applying to. I'd honestly say one of the biggest, mistakes I kind of see in applicants is that their answers are just too general. We understand, candidates are applying to multiple firms. You might have, 10 different firms that you're applying to, and sometimes the questions on the applications are quite similar. Copy and paste an answer, change a few things around, and think that will be good enough. I definitely say please try to avoid doing that. Answers like that really lack specific detail. They sound very generic compared to an answer that's filled with facts about that firm. So obviously look at that firm's website. You're likely to get the most up-to-date information there, but also look at the business press, look on social media. So LinkedIn is particularly good for following firms on sort of in real time and seeing up-to-date cases and deals. Also look at things like Chambers rankings as well and firm awards. So look at what that firm is really excelling in. How are they different from their competitors? What deals have they undertaken recently in industry areas that you're really excited by? Are they perhaps using some legal technology that really saves the costs and time for the client? That's a really big subject at the moment. How are firms actually using technology in order to assist their clients? You can also think about what sort of trainee tasks you would undertake on a deal like this. So if you're looking at a particular case or deal, how would a trainee actually fit into that? Have you spoken to any trainees at events, either in person or virtual events that you might have attended that have given you an insight into what a trainee actually would do to support that transaction? Really mentioning specific names, specific events you've been to, that really helps us to see your motivation for law and for that particular firm. But as well as the work, you should also highlight your interest in that firm's things like their equality, diversity and inclusion initiatives, or perhaps their pro bono work or their networking groups. All of these things will enhance your answer and really make it specific to that firm. So it's not just, the question of why this firm, where you can get in that firm detail. There might be other questions where you can bring in the values of that firm, or, as I say, some pro bono work that firm has done, or a particular DE&I network that firm has gone. So try and pepper your answer with all of that specific detail about that firm that you're applying to. The second thing I'd say is commercial awareness, and obviously that's something you probably heard a lot and something you will hear a lot. So essentially firms really want to see that you can think like a business advisor, not just a lawyer. So that means understanding the client's world. So what challenges are they facing? What opportunities exist? And also, how do external factors actually affect that client? So if you're asked this sort of question in an application, so maybe about a particular client or about a particular practice area or sector, you can use a PESTLE analysis. You might have heard of that before. So it stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental. And they're all factors that could affect a client or a sector. So, for example, how might new regulations impact a business, or what effect could inflation have on costs or growth of a business? How is AI changing the way a company operates? Then sort of take it one step further and then think about where the law firm actually then comes in. So how would they then help that client respond? So that could be by advising on compliance, or managing risk, or supporting on a deal. And really, I guess, putting it simply, commercial awareness is really about just understanding how a firm helps clients manage opportunities, challenges, reduce risk, and actually achieve their goals. So if you can demonstrate that in your application, that's exactly what firms are actually looking for. AllAboutLaw actually have a really great resource to help you with this. So I've got the QR code on the slide here. So it's called the Commercial Awareness Compass. So some of you may already be signed up to it. If you haven't, then please do. It's such a fantastic tool. So it's basically a weekly podcast and video where every week we have a 30-minute discussion with an expert lawyer and a future trainee as well. And they break down one major news story into a beginner, intermediate and advanced level, so you can kind of gradually build your understanding. But importantly, I'd say after listening to a podcast like that, try actually discussing those issues with someone. I think the more comfortable you can get with chatting about commercial issues, how a law firm would support that client, the better you'll then be at discussing these sorts of subjects in an application or face-to-face in an interview. So as I say, we've got the QR code on the slide here. It should take you straight through to that page. So do sign up for the Commercial Awareness Compass if you haven't already. I honestly think out of all the resources we have, it's definitely one of the most useful. So please do take advantage of that. My final point on applications is just around structure as well. And I know it sounds really obvious, but it's honestly something a lot of people fall down on. So, we're looking for clear, well-written communication. That's a key skill for a lawyer. So make sure you use the full word count. Often I read answers that just aren't long enough. And, if you've got somebody that's written 150 words compared to somebody that's, maximised the word count at 250, they can obviously include a lot more detail. So make sure you do maximise the word count. Organise your points into clear paragraphs. Don't just write a big chunk of text. It's quite hard to read something like that. Think about it like a sort of mini essay. So you need to have a proper structure to it. And don't lose marks on other simple things as well, like spelling and grammar. Make sure you get the firm's name right. That's still something that comes up time and time again. I often think it's because maybe people have copied and pasted answers. They've left the wrong firm name in, or maybe they get it right, but they spell it incorrectly. It's a big no-no. So, those sort of details really matter. So make sure you are checking, your answers for those sorts of things. Just quickly wanted to touch on this subject because a lot of people ask me, should I use AI in my application? We all know AI is, playing a big role in the legal world and also in applications as well. So I'd say the key thing to remember is that AI certainly isn't banned by most firms, but I think how you use it really, really matters. So generally it's fine for things like research or proofreading, but your ideas and your wording should really be your own. So I think where people go wrong is they use it, to write their answers for them, and that might sound quite polished, but it's often pretty generic. And when you are reading thousands of applications, it's very easy to spot those ones that do sound very similar. So we can spot that, a mile off. So where I think AI can actually be really useful is in building your commercial awareness. So for example, you might ask, what legal issues does a retail brand face when expanding internationally? Or what does a commercial contracts team do for a tech company? Or how do employment lawyers support a growing business? That kind of thinking helps you to sort of understand the reality behind the work that firms actually do. So your answers can then feel a lot more informed and not just kind of full of buzzwords. Some firms actually will also ask you if you've used AI in your application. So there'll be kind of a tick box and maybe a short section to describe if you have. So I'd always say be honest. So I think used well, it can actually be a real positive, especially if you can show how it actually supports tasks in a firm like, research or drafting or something. So do be honest if you are actually asked how you used it. It may well come up in the interview that they'll ask about your use of AI and how you actually utilised it in your application. So overall, I'd say, use it as a support tool. It can really help you develop your ideas, but the application should still sound like you, as really that's one of the main things that can set you apart from everyone else. So it should sound like you. Just going to touch on psychometric tests quickly now, as I did mention that earlier. So after you do submit your application, some firms will ask you to complete them, so it is worth being prepared. Common types of tests they might use. Some firms will use a logical reasoning test. So that's kind of spotting patterns or sequences in shapes or puzzles. The tests, they mainly test your ability to analyse through abstract reasoning, draw logical conclusions. A verbal reasoning test is kind of, reading a short passage and answering a, perhaps true, false, or cannot say questions. That really focuses on your understanding and analysis of written information. The situational judgment test is a pretty popular one used by quite a number of firms. So it's really how you would respond to various workplace scenarios. And often firms will actually test them on their current trainees, so they can actually see how you actually compare against their current trainee cohort. So if you're thinking in the same way that their trainees do, so quite a good one that a lot of firms do use. I guess these sorts of tests can feel a little bit daunting, but they are very learnable. I think really the best thing you can do is practice, so you get used to the sort of format and you know what to expect. There is a free Watson Glaser style test, as I mentioned earlier, on AllAboutLaw. So you can actually try that as many times as you want. It gives you your answers and lets you know where you've gone wrong, and then obviously you can go back over it and perhaps try again before actually taking your real test with a firm. So definitely do check that out if you are going to be taking tests with any particular firms. So my last point really is just around vacation schemes. So if you do actually kind of jump through all those hoops that we've talked about and, you get yourself a vacation scheme, what can you actually expect? I'm sure many of you will know, but essentially a vacation scheme is kind of a 2 or 3 week placement in a law firm. And actually people often look at them a little bit like an extended interview. So you're really trying to figure out if that firm's right for you, and obviously the firm wants to figure out if you're right for them as well. So usually you'll have a supervisor that you'll be working with from day to day. You'll have a trainee buddy, so someone that's recently been in the same situation as you, that you can go to ask questions as well. And then often you'll have a mentor as well, so someone that you're not actually directly working with, but someone that you can talk to about, how you're actually getting on in the firm. So there's plenty of support there. You do usually spend time in 1 or 2 practice areas. So you might spend your first week in one area, and then you'll move and sit in, a different practice area, maybe for your second week. But really the key is to get involved. So, show enthusiasm, ask questions, say yes to opportunities, like attending meetings or helping on tasks. If you're stuck, have a go at working through it first. Lawyers like to kind of see that proactive approach, but don't be afraid to ask for help as well. That shows your supervisor that you're thinking for yourself, but you're also really willing to learn as well. You'll also have, things like workshops, presentations, networking events while you're on a vacation scheme as well. And these are just as important as well. So try to really speak to, a real range of people, ask about their work, how they got into law, what they're working on at the moment. I think really the people that stand out on a vacation scheme are the ones that kind of really get stuck in. They show an interest, they really make an effort to speak to people rather than those that perhaps tend to sit back a bit and wait to be told what to do. The trainees that you'll meet on a scheme as well are a really fantastic resource, and a great source of knowledge. Obviously, they've recently been in the same position. They'll probably have only been in the firm maybe for a few months, maybe for a year. So ask them about the teams that they've worked in, the matters they've been involved in, how they've actually gone about building their network, and maybe any advice that they would give, for making the most of your vacation scheme. So really attending a scheme, it's honestly one of the best ways to understand what life as a trainee would actually be like, whilst also showing that firm what you can bring to them as well. So if you do get yourself onto a vacation scheme, then definitely make the most of those 2 weeks that you're there. So thank you for listening. I hope it's been helpful. I appreciate it's quite a lot of information that I've thrown at you. So if there is one thing you take away from the session today, it would really be to take advantage of those free tools that I've mentioned. So there's a link to our assessment centre bundle, as we call it, which is our central place to find everything related to law firm applications, interviews, assessment days. As I said, there's lots of videos, there's practical tools to really help you prepare. So do take advantage of them. We've also got the QR code linking to our events listing as well. So we run events throughout the year, all virtual events, and they really help you explore a legal career and really build your skills. A lot of them are firm-led events, so we'll have associates, trainees, partners from different law firms that will cover a whole host of different legal topics. You can hear directly from them. We also have then advice sessions, which I run a lot of, and other people in the team as well. So we cover things like applications, interviews, career paths. So overall, just a really great way to learn more. So ask questions and really connect with people in the profession. So do have a look at what's coming up next as well. But love to move on to questions now. I think we've got a bit of time for that. So if anyone has been thinking of questions as we've been going along, then please do ask your questions now. As I said, if there are other things that perhaps you want to ask me separately, then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And I'm happy to answer people's questions there as well. But over to all of you now.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting, Lindsey. So yes, a reminder, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A or in the chat. You can also email open-justice@open.ac.uk. We'll pick up questions that way. Or you can put your hand up is the other way to ask a question. And while you're all thinking about questions, I've got a general one for you, Lindsey. So as you're aware, most of our students won't be the traditional 18 to 21-year-olds who've come through school. Our students have a wide range of lived experience, including both paid, voluntary and caring responsibilities. So do you have any tips in terms of how they can present that and use that within their applications to stand out and to add value to the application that they're making?
Absolutely, yeah. I think all those sorts of skills that you just mentioned, and all those experiences that you will have had, are extremely valuable. They are a real asset in, in an application. So I really think that the best way to approach it is to look at the sorts of skills, do some digging into, what sort of skills are required, as a lawyer, as a trainee, what sort of skills are they looking for? So obviously it'll be things like, time management, resilience, problem solving, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of, examples that you can use from your experience where you've actually used those skills. So it's about making that link. I think sometimes I sort of see with people that do have a bit more experience, that they sort of think that experience speaks for itself. So maybe they'll just, they'll list their work experience and, they've got, maybe 10 or 20 years of experience, but really you kind of need to make clear what those skills are and why they're relevant. So if you can, understand what the role is and then why you're suitable for it, that really, really makes a difference. And I also think that commercial understanding that you will have built up as well is incredibly important, and that's an advantage you'll have, on someone that is, perhaps, straight out of university or still studying at university. And that's really, really valuable to law firms. They want that lived experience. They want people to understand the clients. So if you can, really emphasize that, then that really stands out.
I mean, that leads on to another question. I was thinking, I was a traditional 18 to 21-year-old who went into law. And I remember being terrified of the whole idea of commercial awareness when I was looking for jobs, because I didn't really understand what it was, to be honest. Are there any resources or any suggestions you'd make if there were students out there in a similar position to I was, thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure what this is all about, and about the business aspect of law?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that commercial awareness compass that I mentioned is honestly one of the best tools that you can use, I think. So it's a podcast. It's also a video. You also get a newsletter with all the main points emailed to you as well. So, and that's every week. So I'd say with commercial awareness, it's not about trying to cram, the week before you do an application. It's that steady build up of knowledge over time. In terms of practicalities, most applications for law firms usually open in around October time. So a lot of the talks that I'm giving at the moment, I'm really saying use the kind of summer months to really start to build that up gradually. So start to listen to that podcast every week. Just make it part of your routine where you put it on, and you, as I say, it's in a sort of beginner, intermediate, and advanced level. So start off just listening to the beginner level, and maybe within a few weeks you'll move on to the intermediate level and then gradually build that knowledge. So it's about having an interest in how businesses work. It's about thinking about how all the things that are going on in the world affect businesses, and then what a law firm does to then try and assist those businesses. So I hate that people sometimes think it is a big scary topic, because it doesn't need to be. It really is as simple as just being interested in what's happening in the business world, and then what a law firm actually does to try and assist those clients. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that podcast. There are lots of other resources out there that are similar. Law firms will often have their own podcasts, their own videos that you can watch on their own websites. So that will talk about different cases and deals that they've been part of, how they actually support clients. So it's just starting to get that understanding of what's going on in the world, and then how a law firm assists.
Yep. So we do have a few questions to the Q&A now. So Anik put this question, I think, at the start of your presentation. So I think you covered a lot of this, but just in case there's anything you want to add. She says, what's the one thing that consistently distinguishes candidates who successfully secure trainee contracts or trainee positions from those that don't, i.e. what makes an application genuinely stand out beyond strong academics and work experience?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's kind of the $1 million question, isn't it? Really, it's what actually is gonna help you get through. I'd honestly say it's that tailoring of your application. So it's really about doing your research on a firm, and actually really being specific in your detail that you're giving about that firm. There's so many answers that I read that just sound really generic, that you could literally send it to another firm and it would be equally as relevant for that firm. If you don't pick out the specific detail about that firm, that it just doesn't stand out. It doesn't stand out in a crowded field. I ran a session yesterday with a particular firm, and they said they had 5,000 applications for 25 spaces, which was, I was like, whoa. So, and these are the sorts of numbers that some firms are looking at. Obviously some, smaller or high street firms, regional firms, have slightly lower numbers, but a lot of the big firms are receiving thousands and thousands of applications. So in order to stand out in that crowded field, you really need to be doing your research on that firm. Your application should sound like it's the only firm you're applying to. Each firm wants to see that. They want to feel special. They want to feel like, yes, you understand our firm and you want to work here, not that just you've sent out 10 applications and it just sounds like one you've sent to everyone else. So that's really what will make you stand out. And I think, as I sort of mentioned, that's not just about answering that why this firm question. It's about trying to get that detail in other answers as well. So, mention their, diversity and inclusion initiatives, mention their pro bono work, mention, different people you've met, different events that you've been to. If you can kind of pepper all of your answers with that detail, that kind of really brings it together as a really strong application.
It's great. And I think associated with this it is another question. Jay Casper, sorry, I'm not sure what the first name is. He or she says, any tips for international candidates to stand out in a pool of home applicants? Since the competition is fierce enough, what qualities will make an employer go the extra mile or extra cost to and choose an international over a domestic candidate?
In the firms that I recruit for, there really isn't a differentiation. Like, obviously, it may be that some people require visa assistance or sponsorship, but it doesn't make a difference in terms of the applicants. For a lot of firms, you don't even see that. You don't see people's personal information, so you may not even know that. Some firms you don't even see the university name. So for a lot of for a lot of firms, it isn't a factor at all. So I think international candidates are viewed in exactly the same way as someone that's from the UK. But I would say, obviously there may be experience that you can, really valuable experience that you can bring if you have, worked internationally, if you have, worked in a different jurisdiction, that can actually be really valuable experience that you can actually bring. So make sure you make the most of any experience you've had in terms of explaining why that's important and why, particularly if you are obviously applying to a law firm that works internationally, why that's important. And equally, if you have, language skills as well, that can be extremely beneficial as well. A lot of law firms have global clients, and they have, they want trainees that can really make those connections with clients. So really make the most of that international background if that is relevant for you.
That's great, thank you. And Lauren asks, I'm in the space now where I know which firms are specialists in the area I want to pursue, and I know which training contracts I'm aiming for. But how do I gain deeper knowledge on those specific firms?
Sure. I'm not sure, Lauren, if you've attended lots of events for those firms, but I would definitely say, the first thing I would do is to try and make some connections in those firms. So I would go along to virtual events that those firms are running. So that might be, through those particular firms themselves. It could be through AllAboutLaw. We work with lots and lots of different law firms. So we'll run events with them. So try and go along to those sorts of events to learn about different areas of law, but also kind of their application process as well. I think for, each firm's process will differ slightly. So, try and get a real handle on what they're expecting from you. In terms of obviously their work, really, make some connections on LinkedIn, follow people that work in areas that you're particularly interested in. Ask questions. A lot of the time, trainees will be really, really willing to, to share their knowledge and experience, through connecting on LinkedIn and maybe answering, they're not going to probably want massive long questions, but if you ask a little bit of insight into their experience and what helped them stand out, and what research maybe they did before applying to that firm, honestly, I feel like trainees are often really, really willing to help because they've really recently been in that situation, and they know that help is invaluable. So try to make those connections, go along to those events, start following those firms to really help build that knowledge over time before you actually then come to apply.
Thank you, that's great. Annick's asked a question. She says, for someone aiming to become a solicitor advocate, are there particular experiences or qualities that firms value early on?
I mean, I think things like mooting and debating, those sorts of things can obviously be really relevant if you want to kind of follow that route. I'd say that kind of contentious side of the law is an area you'll definitely want to explore. So whether that means looking at firms that specialize in that area, or looking at a full service firm that has Herbert Smith Freehills, when I was there, they have a really strong advocacy team. So look at firms that specialize in those areas, but really think about those skills that make someone successful in advocacy, and what you've actually done so far that can really demonstrate those skills. And if you can't really show examples of that at the moment, then look at ways you can do that. So whether that's through as I say, being involved in something like debating, or perhaps volunteer work where you may work with a legal advice clinic and work on certain cases. So that can all help to build that knowledge and experience.
That's great. And for those interested in mooting, the OU's Law Society runs our mooting. So please do get in touch with them if that's something you're interested in. So thank you for that. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions, please do pop them in the chat or in the Q&A, or pop your hand up. While we're waiting to see if any other questions come along, Lindsay, the other question that I've had asked to me when I've run events with our students, we have a larger proportion of students that declare a disability than perhaps at other more traditional universities, because of the flexibility the OU offers to students such as that. So if you are a student who has a disability, have you any advice about at what stage you should disclose that, address it, make the law firm aware of those issues? Because I know answers from people have ranged from straight away in terms of reasonable adjustments through to if you can manage, don't tell them. I've seen the whole barrage of kind of responses. And from your perspective, looking at these kind of commercial firms, have you got any advice specifically for students with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, I would always say, mention it as early as possible. I would definitely say don't hold back. I think these days firms expect that. They want to accommodate people. They want to make the process as suitable for everyone as they can. They understand that the process isn't always exactly as everyone it can perform at their best. So they want to make those adjustments to ensure that people can perform at their best. So please do make sure that you disclose that early on. So usually that will be in the application will mention that, if there isn't a section for that, which most of the time there always will be. But I would then contact the early years recruitment team and ask for any any particular adjustments that you do need. Don't battle on and think, well, I'll just try and get through this stage of the process. Try and get that assistance as early as you can. There's lots and lots of different ways that firms now can adjust their process, as I say, much more than 10 or 15, 20 years ago. There's so many different ways that can be done now. So ask what sort of adjustments you yourself would want. Don't wait for them to say, oh, we can offer you this. Ask for what you want, and then see if obviously they can come to an arrangement with you. So definitely always be open and honest about it, and it's not going to hold you back at all. Firms want to assist you in that process.
That's great, thank you. And another really interesting question, how is AI changing the way that law firms assess candidates? I've heard on the news some businesses actually using AI to sift through those initial applications, for example. And I suppose a second question is, are there new skills students should be developing as a result? Is the skill set that's expected from trainee solicitors changing as a result of AI, and what should they be focusing on developing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from the firms that I work with, and I work, you know, even the firms that I don't sort of directly assist with their recruitment, I talk to a lot of different firms. I'm involved in a lot of different forums, and I don't know at the moment anyone that's using it to sift people out in the firms that I'm aware of. So it's not kind of a keywords thing where you're kind of, you know, out the door if you haven't, you know, mentioned certain keywords. All the firms that I know and work with, applications are read by an actual person, so it isn't actually being used. I'm sure maybe for some people it is, maybe in finance it is, maybe I used to work in investment banking recruitment, maybe now they might be moving towards that, I don't know, but I know for you know, all the firms that I work with at the moment, that it's not kind of being used for that purpose. In terms of kind of developing those skills, I'd say it is a really important skill. It is changing the way trainees are working. You know, all that kind of traditional, you know, drafting, research, you know, is being, you know, AI is being introduced into that. So I think having a good understanding of how different AI programs work is actually a real plus. So if you use it in your studies, if you use it in your, you know, any jobs that you currently have, make sure you talk about that on an application. It's a really important skill that will grow and grow. And, you know, even from 2 years ago, you know, people, you know, didn't mention it as much. I'd say now pretty much everyone mentions AI in their application, how they're using it, why that would be useful in a firm. So, you know, really look at those trainee tasks and you know, so this is what I mean about making connections and asking questions, going along to events, see how actually it is being used for you know, in trainee work, and then look at your skills, what you're currently doing, and try and make that link, because it is it's something that will, as I say, grow more and more, and absolutely it's an essential skill that firms will want you to have. Yeah,
that's great. And John Paul's helpfully put a link in the chat, students, to some free courses on AI and the legal profession. So that not only talks about what AI is, but also what are the considerations you need to think about when you're using AI in the context of legal advice and legal knowledge. And for those that are interested, there's also a course looking at use cases. So firms have shared with us how they're using AI within the legal profession. So that might be a useful resource to be that little bit more specific in your answers around AI. So feel free to check that out. Lindsey, they are free, so authored by the Open Justice Centre, so feel free to share them as well if that's useful to other people. It's a helpful resource.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. We probably have 1 minute left. If there's one other quick question, I can't see anything that I've missed in the chat or in the Q&A, but Nicola, John Paul, feel free to jump in if there is. John Paul, is there anything on the email that we need to ask?
No, there isn't, Liz. There isn't nothing's come in on the email, no.
Perfect, thank you.
And no, I think you're right. I can't see any other ones in the chat or in the Q&A.
That's great. I think then, given that we've just got a couple of minutes to go, I'll draw it to a close now so that we don't overrun. Lindsey, thank you so much on behalf of our students for coming and sharing your experience and your wisdom. It's been really useful, particularly I think for students looking at applying for those large commercial firms. So thank you very much, and for your willingness to for students to be able to reach out to you if they have any specific questions. A reminder that we will be sharing the recording and the transcript in about 6 weeks, isn't it, John Paul? So keep an eye out if you want to go back, capture those QR codes, and we will be sharing those shortly. So thank you very much, Lindsey, and I hope everyone has a good afternoon. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Going to stop the recording.